All right. I'd like to start off by saying Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Racha Kodash.
All right.
Welcome to another live lesson. The name of this one is He does not move nor stir them until the said measure be fulfilled. And pretty much that's taken from Second Ezra, the fourth chapter, the Apocrypha. And based off of, this current evil, wicked world, which is in a transition period to fall. And it still hasn't fallen. It's still creating chaos and havoc and destruction and wickedness and, influencing wickedness on the planet. But it's just being built up more and more until that final day when the Lord said enough is enough and this place is out of here. There's, so much going on that, it's hard to keep up with everything. But the main things to track, prophecy wise, the MOTB, World War III, uproars of the people, all these different scandals that are happening. This is all part of the smoke and mirrors, to cover up a lot of shit that's going on, to get people's minds off of, certain important topics or issues. So Esau uses a lot of distractions, to, keep them people's minds occupied, through those distractions, through the bread and circuses, so on and so forth. The only solution to bring world peace on the earth is for Esau to go down. There's no other way. This devil, is nothing good. Everything about him is evil. Everything about him is wicked. His only mindset is to continuously increase his goods, his riches, and constantly pound down, anyone that is not of his ilk. And even those that are of his ilk, they're so, unsatiable, means that they can't be satisfied, that they'll destroy each other just to, have one up on each other, and that's, how these families have been, the international banking families have been from the beginning, since they got control of the world, going all the way back to the Renaissance period, which was a great time of deception. And now we're in a great time of revelation. So the first step to the wicked going down was the wicked are the Edomites in the scriptures. Those are the so-called white people. And the first step for them before they can go down is to be exposed, be revealed. And that's what's happening, with the Israelites. They're exposing, we're exposing Esau's, madness and his underhanded dealings, and the unjust ways that he got everything, and also exposing how they are not the people of the Most High, how they deceived the world and duped everyone to believe that the Heavenly Father and His Son and the angels were white, the Israelites were white, so on and so forth, so-called white, and all of these things are being exposed. But nevertheless, wickedness is ruling rampant, on the planet, and the kingdom of heaven cannot be established in such a corrupt cesspool of filth. And that's why the Lord is going to send that, firestorm, and take this place out with a combination of the nuclear missiles and the lasers from the chariots. And these are things that we speak about as we see them, that day approaching, because, this is the hope. And also this is the only solution to bring in, peace once and for all, on the earth. This earth is under a total wicked vibration. It's just disgusting to the point where a person that's trying to live right the best of their ability, they can't function, in this nasty, decrepit, just filth. That's the best way I could put it. It's just filth. It's just a cesspool of iniquity, and we can't wait for Yahweh Bashem Al Shai to put it down. It can't go down fast enough, you know. So what I want to start off with is in Second Ezra, the fourth chapter, and this is pretty much a transition of worlds, a change of worlds, which I believe that was Elder Abba Bivens that wrote a book called The Change of Worlds. And pretty much it's what it is. Now the word world has been misconceived, misinterpreted, because people look at the word world in one dimension as the whole entire planet. But the word world has many different meanings. You have a cosmos, which is an organization and an arrangement. You can have many different cosmos, but only one cosmos that the Most High deals with. That's the nation of Israel. You have the oikomene in the sense of the whole entire planet, which goes hand in hand with Gi or Geo, which is Earth. Those two definitions go together. And then you have something known as Eon. Eon is an age. An age is something given, a time frame, an uninterrupted rule. You have, I believe it's the constellations in the heavens, the what Esau calls the zodiac, the 12 zodiacs. From one zodiac to transition to the next one, I believe is 2,125 years, if I'm not mistaken on that. That's an age of, like they say, the age of Aquarius. That's the age of the so-called zodiacs, little more than 2,000 years. But you also have the age of empires or rule of empires. And we're actually in the final stages of the final age of the heathen rule on the planet, and that's Esau. So this is 2 Ezra 4:26. It says, "Then answered he me and said, the more thou searchest, the more thou shalt marvel, for the world hasteth fast to pass away." And you have people today, even Jake, saying how they notice how fast time is going. And that's because the Lord is speeding up the time to bring an end to this place. Because except those days be shortened, there shall be no flesh left to be saved. And you can see that, these devils are destroying everything to the point where you constantly feel sick, constantly coughing shit up, constantly sneezing, constantly blowing your nose, and it's just like there's no limits to this devil. So this devil has to be totally put down in order for all of this shit to stop. It says, and cannot comprehend the things that are promised to it. I'm sorry, things that are promised to the righteous in time to come. For this world is full of unrighteousness and infirmities. And that's why it must and will be put down. It says, but as concerning the things whereof thou askest me, I will tell thee, for the evil is sown, but the destruction thereof is not yet come. Right. And the rulers of this world have not fallen. Let me get that real quick. I believe that's Isaiah 26:18. The inhabitants. Isaiah 26:18. We have been with child. We have been in pain. Yeah. We're like a woman ready to give labor. At the 9th month, at the very last seconds of it. We have, as it were, brought forth wind, right? We haven't been delivered. Like the prophet Jeremiah said, the summer is past, the harvest is ended, and we are not saved. We have not wrought any deliverance in the earth, right? Because we're still catching hell. The apple of the Most High's eye is still here catching hell. And it's about to get even worse, we see that, the time of Jacob's trouble on the horizon. It's right there at the door. You see it peeking over the mountaintops, and it's about to get even worse. It says, neither have the inhabitants of the world fallen. Esau hasn't fallen yet. They're the main, right now, Esau is the main landlord of the planet Earth, and they haven't fallen yet. All right, so let's go back. Leave that on that. So going back to 2nd Ezra 4 and 29 now, if therefore that which is sown be not turned upside down, and technically it should say turned right side up, and the reason why I say that is because the world is turned upside down, but the Lord is saying, in other words, he's going to turn Esau upside down, get rid of these devils out of rulership and put his people in rulership, beginning with his son, Yahushua, his beloved son. It says, and if the place where the evil is sown pass not away, then cannot it come that is sown with good. And that's why I don't understand for the life of me, these other Israelite groups out here who are comfortable in this cesspool. Here it is, there's all type of shit going on. I mean, just madness. And you would think that since the Lord, opened up your eyes to see that this world is evil, that you would hasten the day, as the scriptures say. But no, they're comfortable in it. They're pretty much helping to keep this world afloat, with their misdeeds. It says, for the grain of evil seed has been sown in the heart of Adam from the beginning, and how much ungodliness has it brought up unto this time. So at the time of Ezra, which was roughly around 400, 500 BC, from the time that Adam, Eve went off, Adam went off, until the time of Ezra, there was a lot of wickedness that grew in the earth, and it says, and because, the flood came and the earth was repopulated, and it went right back to the same shit. It says, and how much shall it yet bring forth until the time of threshing come? See? So how much more is it going to bring unto the time of threshing? In the time of threshing, we're pretty much at the door of the time of threshing. Let's go real quick to Matthew, because the time of threshing is the end of the world. But it's not the end of the world as far as the whole planet is concerned, because the whole earth, the whole planet is not going to be destroyed, as the devil vocab said, that the earth is just going to explode. No, it's not. Ecclesiastes 1:4, one generation passeth away, another generation cometh, but the earth abideth forever. So the earth will always be here, and it was set up and established for man's service, beginning with the Israelites, because all things were made for our sakes. The world was made for our sakes. So Matthew 13:38 says, the field is the world. This is the parable. The good seed are the children of the kingdom, right, which are the Israelites. But the tares are the children of the wicked one, which are the Edomites. All right, these are, individuals that look like Jake, but are really Edomites. It says the enemy that sowed them is the devil, which is Esau. The harvest is the end of the world. This is the time of threshing. The harvest is the end of the world. And the reapers are the angels, right? Because the angels are going to come and separate, the Israelites from the ones that are not Israelites. Let's go down to the word world. I want to see what the word world there says. It should be eon. Yep, eon, see? So eon is an age, an uninterrupted rule. And that's why the disciples, they asked Yahushua that very question. Because, in order for the kingdom of Yahushua / Israel to come, this modern day empire of America has to be put down. The disciples, it says here, Matthew 24:3, and as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? Right. So when you scroll down to that word world there, once again, eon, age. And what age was that? The age of the Edomite. Because when you go to, let's see if I could do it this way. If you go to Second Ezra's chapter 6 and verse 9, it says, for Esau is the end of the world, or the end of the age. I'm not sure if in the GNT or any of the other translations that'll use the word age, but when you go to the Latin, the word there is seculi. Seculi is the Latin word that's synonymous with the Greek word eon, that's synonymous with the Hebrew word iwalam, which all means age, a time period, a set time period. And each empire had a set amount of time that they ruled. That's why in the book of Job it says, seeing his days are determined, the number of his months are with thee. So the Lord knows exactly how long each empire would rule. When you go back to the major empires dealing with prophecy-wise, in the book of Daniel 2, the book of Daniel 7, the statue of Nebuchadnezzar, the dream that he had, or the vision that he had, Daniel the 7th chapter, the different beasts that were used for empires. Each one of those empires had a certain period to rule. You know, you had the Assyrio-Babylonian Empire, right? And their height of the Neo-Babylonian Empire was 609, 605 BC, if I'm not mistaken, down to 539 BC. And in 539 BC, that's when the Medo-Persian Empire, their rule, they took over the Babylonian Empire, and they became the world rulers of the time. Let me see, 2nd Ezra 6 and 9. Esau represents the end of this age. Beautiful, bro. The water, bro. And Jacob represents the beginning of the new age, right? And that's pretty much it. The age, so each empire had a certain amount of time to rule. Then the Medo-Persian Empire ruled from 539 BC to roughly around 333 BC, when Alexander the Greek, or the Creep, took over the known world, and that began the age of the Greeks. And then roughly around 25 BC, that's when they were fully absorbed into the Roman Empire. That's why sometimes you'll hear scholars or historians label it the Greco-Roman Empire, because the last rulers were Cleopatra the 7th and Ptolemy the 13th, I believe it was. And they pretty much were just absorbed, they were brought into the Roman Empire, and that was the Roman Empire's rule. So the Roman Empire's rule went back to roughly around 65 BC with Pompey, till really like 96, that's really 96 AD, 65 BC to about 96 AD, roughly, give or take, and that was their age. Then their age was cut short, and it came back into rulership, into power, during the time of the Renaissance period, which began in the 1300s, but they really didn't start didn't start sinking their teeth into the earth till the mid to late 1400s, until this very day, 2025. So this has been the last or final age of Esau's empire. So that's why it says, for Esau's the end of the world, or like the brother put up, the end of this age, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth, or the beginning of the new age. All right. So let's go back to 2nd Ezra's 4 and 31. Ponder now by thyself how great a fruit of wickedness the grain of evil seed had brought forth, right? All the way up until the time of Ezra, because the earth was wicked, but how much more wicked is it now? And when the ears shall be cut down, which are without number, how great a floor shall they fill, right? Because remember, this is all being set up for the threshing floor. This is like, if you read Revelation 14, it speaks about those grapes being, put on the floor. And once the, like, when you made wine, you took grapes, you put them in a threshing floor. And once the threshing floor was full, then you would go in there and stomp, the grapes and get all the juice out of them. Well, the Lord has this, threshing floor filled. And it's just about that time to start threshing. It says, then I answered and said, how and when shall these things come to pass? Wherefore our years few and evil? And he answered me, saying, do not thou hasten above the Most Highest, for thy haste is in vain to be above him, for thou hast much exceeded. Did not the souls of the righteous ask questions of these things in their chambers, saying, how long shall I hope on this fashion? Yeah, because we want to get out of here. We want the Lord to deliver us out of here, get rid of this cesspool. I mean, like in our little frail bodies, enough is enough. But the Lord is bound by his words. That's why it says in Songs of Solomon, wake not my love till he please. When cometh the fruit of the floor of our reward? And unto these things Uriel the archangel gave them answer and said, even when the number of seeds is filled in you, right? Because you had the prophets that had to prophesy, a certain amount of prophecies before the Lord can actually make them come to pass. And we're at the very end of that. Like there's no really like open visions right now, as far as, prophesying of, pretty much we're breaking down the prophecies that the ancient prophets, had. The current prophecies that we're speaking about are things that were written before, and we're speaking about the kingdom, but the kingdom was already spoken of, so there's really no like open visions like that now, but we're in a time of the fulfillment of these visions, right? It says, for he hath weighed the world in the balance, right? And that's the thing, the Lord requires equity. He gives these different empires the authority and the power to rule, and when they become wicked, he brings them down. But it's all part of the plan. It's all part of the movie, and that's what most people don't understand, that the Most High creates both good and evil. And he sets everything up. It's his movie. It's just like when you have a director, producer, they put together a movie. They have a certain vision of the movie. They have certain characters that are playing in the movie and certain scenes that will play out. The beginning scenes, middle scenes, and the ending scenes, which are the beginning of times, middle of times, and ending of times. And at the end of it all, then they bring forth the destruction, or they bring forth, their production, should I say, and at the end, they'll bring it to, to where their vision led them. Well, the Lord's vision is the kingdom of heaven, and at the end, just before the kingdom of heaven, a great time of violence and destruction on the planet, to usher in, this great time of peace. And that's what we're witnessing right now. It says, by measure had he measured the times, and by number had he numbered the times, and he doth not move nor stir them until the said measure be fulfilled. Why? Because the Lord is bound by his word. And he's not going to break his word, not even for his great name's sake. So I got a couple of precepts. I was reading Psalm 73 last night, and I went to the NET, which is a new English translation, and it has some good good meat in it, so to speak. And I decided to use that version. I decided to use that version to for this lesson. But I read Psalm 74 this morning. I just wanted to touch on this a little bit and then get into Psalm 73. Psalm 74:19. Do not hand the life of your dove over to a wild animal. Esau's a wild animal. Do not continue to disregard the lives of your oppressed people. Right, because here it is, we're the people of the Most High. That's why in Malachi it says, how hast thou loved us? Here it is, we're supposed to be your people, Ezra said, why don't we possess an inheritance with the world? Here it is, we getting beat down by this devil that you consider to be nothing. So how is that love? Because Jake don't understand the true definition of the word love when it comes from the Most High. The Most High said, whom he loveth, he chasteneth and rebuketh often. Because the chastening and the rebuking is supposed to keep Jake from going astray. See? So it says, remember your covenant promises, for the dark regions of the earth are full of places where violence rules, right? And this is why true judgment never goes forth, because the violent people, the wicked people, are in rulership. They're in authority. They don't rule right because they are not moral people. Now, if the scriptures say that the tender mercies of the wicked are cruel, then that means that the most intimate inside of them, or that can be compassionate, is cruel. So that means they have no compassion. They're in the negative side of compassion. They're pretty much, apathetic. They're pretty much, soulless, so to speak. They have black hearts. They're evil. They're wicked. Now, on the other hand, Jake is a total opposite. Because here it is, we've been beat down, we've been, oppressed, been done all different types of evil and wrong, but yet we still have it within us to have and show compassion. Esau doesn't have an ounce of compassion in them. And that's what the Lord said, he's going to have judgment without mercy, that has showed no mercy. It says, do not let the afflicted be turned back in shame. Let the oppressed and poor praise your name. Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. Rise up, O Most High, defend your honor. Remember how fools insult you all day long, right? Because this, I want to say the F-bomb, this, Peter stuffer, this, sausage sniffer, Yuval Harari, he's going to talk all this bullshit about how they could piss the Most High off as much as they want because now they have the power to control the weather or whatever the case may be. So how long is the Lord going to allow this devil to blaspheme him like that, to do these things, right? It says, do not disregard what your enemies say or the unceasing shouts of those who defy you, right? Because it's a constant, pounding of this, blasphemous voice of Esau, day after day after day after day, and it gets worse and worse and worse. So let me just bring this back to the King James so I could move on. So now we're going to go to Psalm 73. We're going to start at the top. This, once again, New English Translation. It says, certainly the Most High is good to Israel and to those whose motives are pure, right, which are the elect. But as for me, my feet almost slipped. My feet almost slid out from under me. Yeah, because before we woke up to this truth, we saw these devils prospering. We didn't, we knew something was up, in our spirit. We knew that Esau was never right, but, we were under that mindset of, okay, well, we're supposed to love everybody, forgive, forget, we were all up under that spell. So we were pretty much out there just without knowledge, It says, for I envy those who are proud as I observe the prosperity of the wicked, and them devils are living it up, Sometimes, you scratching 2 pennies together, trying to, pay your bills and, do whatever it is you got to do. And these devils just, they can splurge if they want. But that's the thing about it. These super rich, they don't splurge like that. Their thing is just about making money. They'll buy things that appreciate. Jake buys things that depreciates. That's why you have these different entertainers that become multimillionaires and be broke, like 10 years later, 5 years later. Because Jake, is about, there's a few Jakes now that invest their money and stuff like that to make more money. But for the most part, once Jake gets that money, because they never had it, they just spend it and splurge till there's no more. But these devils are not like that. It says, for they suffer no pain. Their bodies are strong and well fed. Yeah, because they eat the best stuff. They have the best naturopaths. They have access to the best herbs and the best medicines. You better believe they don't take that shit that they give you at the at the hospitals, at the pharmacies. It says they are immune to trouble common to men. Yeah, they ain't catching hell like the average man is catching, especially like the Israelite man. This is why now you see in Esau these lower level Edomites crashing out, because they're going through the hardships that Jake has been dealing with since the devil got here. And Jake has gotten so accustomed to it and so immune to it that it doesn't even affect him. You still have Jake, complaining and stuff, but when didn't Jake complain? But now Esau is to the point where they can't handle it. That fire is too hot. It says they do not suffer as other men do. Yeah, and these devils don't, but they're about to, because you have to remember, when you are brought up under a silver spoon and you haven't worked a day in your life, you've been pampered your whole life. You come from a family that's been pampered and passed down what generational wealth, generation after generation of things that they stole from other people. You living good, but then one day you find yourself in the poorhouse, so to speak. You're not going to know how to react. There's a parable, about the unjust steward. And he said, matter of fact, let me get that real quick. And that's dealing with Esau, the unjust steward. Let's go to Luke. I believe that's 18, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, it's not that one. Let's see. Is it the 19th chapter? Nope. It might be 16 at the beginning. Let's try 16. Yep, the unrighteous steward. Luke 16:1. And he said also unto his disciples, there was a certain rich man, just dealing with Esau, which had a steward, right? Meaning someone that was running his business. And the same was accused unto him that he had wasted his goods, right? He wasn't very good at what he did. So pretty much, but he was living it up. Like you have these CEOs, CFOs, they live good. They live good off of ripping people off. They don't work hard at all. What they work hard at is coming up with new and creative ways on how to rip people off. That's what they do. And these different firms and these different businesses that Esau sets up. It says, and he called him and said unto him, how is it that I hear this of thee? Give an account of thy stewardship, for thou mayest be no longer steward. Then the steward said within himself, what shall I do? For my Lord doth take away from me the stewardship. I cannot dig to beg. I am ashamed. See, I cannot dig. I cannot, they don't know how to work. They don't want to work. You had a movie called, I believe it was Companyman. Yeah, Ben Affleck, we call him Ben Asscrack, that played in the movie. And these were individuals that were CEOs, CFOs, individuals that were in that corporate world that were living good. They were getting paid. They were living good. And the company started doing really bad because of the mismanagement of the money and the funds. And they had to lay off a lot of people. And some of the ones that got laid off were some of the top individuals that got used to living a certain type of lifestyle. They had to go down to a lower level to go, work in construction and stuff like that. And they were not accustomed to that. So that's pretty much, like this, right? The steward said within himself, what should I do? For my Lord taketh away from me the stewardship. I cannot dig. I don't know how to work. I can't work with my hands. These devils have not worked an honest day in their life. I'm talking about the international bankers. To beg, I am ashamed. See what it says in the NLT. The manager thought to himself, now what? My boss has fired me. I don't have the strength to dig ditches. Yeah, because you're weak sauce. I cannot dig. I am ashamed to beg. Let's see what's this one says. My boss has fired me. I don't have the strength to dig ditches. Yeah. So these devils are not equipped like that. Now that's why Elder Pastor used to say years ago, I don't know how Esau is gonna make it the first hour of slavery, because you're not built like that. You're not built like that. You don't work like that. You've lived a pampered life, so you're gonna go from riches to rags. So how are you gonna survive? That's why he also said the Lord gonna have to make a billion more Edomites or more, to replace the first ones that once we get our hands on them in the kingdom of heaven. It says, I am resolved what to do. When I am put out of the stewardship, they may receive me into their houses. So pretty much, it goes into, him, getting money for his master, and pretty much how should I use this as a parable, to show how if you are forgiven much trespasses, you should forgive those, because this same steward, once his master forgave him, he had someone that owed him, and he's like, nah, the hell with that, put him in the stocks, throw him in the prison, all of that. And the master came back and cursed them out, So this is a parable or a scenario in mercy, showing mercy. But the point is, dealing with something physical, as far as Esau, being a CEO, living this particular lifestyle, and having to go from that to digging ditches, being a servant, taking orders when they're used to barking out orders. That's going to be very hard for them, because that's not something that they're used to. But you're going to have to get used to it. You're going to do it, bitch. Inside joke. All right, so let's go to Psalm 73 and 6 now. Arrogance is their necklace. Why? Because when you get money like that and you become rich, you become proud, very arrogant. Do you see how some of these individuals that come from nothing and they make it as entertainers, and they get wealth, and people try to come and get an autograph from them or talk to them, they just look at them like they so beneath them, and then until they find themselves back in the poorhouse. Quick little story. George Lopez, before he became famous, his idol, was Eric Estrada. Eric Estrada was the Issacharite that was in a series called Chips, which was a California Highway Patrol, and he met him, he was excited, and he went to talk to him, and he said the dude just pretty much ignored him or said something to him, like, in other words, like, get the fuck out of here, I mean, I don't remember the exchange, right? So as George Lopez, years later, when he became famous, he was doing his stand-up. He say, he was like, be careful who you diss, so many words, motherfucker, because look at you now, look at me. So basically you're not popular anymore. You ain't getting money like you was getting. You ain't the thing anymore, and I'm popping. But that's how Esau is. They proud. They look down on everybody else. So they're gonna find themselves in the poorhouse. They're gonna find themselves in a destitute state. They're gonna find themselves in a place, where they're gonna get treated worse than how they treated the people of the earth. It says, and violence is their clothing, right? Because whatever they want, they take. Because they first send in the economic hitman to try to pay off a particular country for their resources and whatever it is that they want. And if they don't, then they send then they send the real hitman out. So Esau gonna get what he wants, as they say, by hook or by crook. They're going to get it one way or another. Because that's just who they are. It says their prosperity causes them to what? Do wrong. So they're not prospering because they're doing the right thing. They're putting their eggs in one basket and making different deals and different agreements with people of different places to be able to attain these resources. No, they're taking them by violence, by wrong. Their thoughts are sinful. They mock and say evil things. They proudly threaten violence, right? And that's what it. If you don't come, like there was a meme that somebody put together years ago. If you don't come to, I forget exactly how it's worded, but it says something along the lines: if you don't come to democracy, democracy will come to you. And when they showed democracy coming to you, they showed this big plane dropping bombs. And that's pretty much that says a lot, because that's Esau's motto. Pretty much he gets it by however he, by whatever means he has to. It says they speak as if they rule in heaven, right? Because they speak against the heavens. They speak like as if they are the Most High, like as if they are Yahweh Shai and the angels, and lay claim to the earth. See, they lay claim to the earth. So pretty much, they stake their claim in the earth. Now the earth has been given into their hands, but you do still have certain nations that have certain resources and lands, that belong to them. But Esau comes in there somehow, some way, when he finds out, that there's something there that's of value, and finds out a way to take it from them. Like you had, what was that? I believe that was in Oklahoma. Forget the name of the movie. Flowers of something. Dinner with Gad, and the plot of land that Gad had out there. Esau gave it to them because it was barren. There was nothing there, So they said, "No, you can have that. There's nothing there." And what happened was, eventually they found out that there was oil there, so they went around and pretty much, deleted the heirs of that land so that they can take it. Flowers of a something moon or something like that. Flowers of a diamond. I forget the exact title of the movie. But this is how Esau does. And that's how they lay their claim. That's why it says that a great sword was given to him and he took peace from the earth. It says, therefore, they have more than enough food to eat. Right. They have more than heart could wish. And even suck up the water of the sea. They say, how does the Most High know what we do? Is the sovereign one aware of what goes on? Take a good look. This is what the wicked are like. Those who always have it so easy and get richer and richer, right? And you've seen that. Like in 2020, when the whole shutdown thing happened, these international bankers more than quadrupled their wealth. And the poor, their wealth dwindled. The little bit that they had kept dwindling and dwindling and dwindling, so much so that the middle class went down to the poorhouse, or most of them. And that was pretty much the plan. Because one thing about this so-called elite is they want to run a world where everyone is dependent upon them for everything. Yeah. This your house, but that's my TV. Yeah. Shalom, brother. Killers of the Flower Moon. Okay, the water, brother. Killers of the Flower Moon. Yep, that's a movie. It's in Oklahoma. I saw the movie, good movie. But I forgot all the little particulars and the details, They had the particular Gadite tribe, and so on and so forth. But, the point is that they gave that land to Gad because it was barren, or so they thought. But once they found out that there was oil there, black gold, they concocted a whole plan to pretty much to delete all of the heirs of that land so that Esau can get in there. So much so that they feigned, one of them, like the character that Leonardo DiCaprio played, feigned himself to fall in love with a Gadite woman to marry her so that he can stake claim to the property. That's how these devils operate. That's why it says, never trust thine enemies. For as iron rusteth, so is his wickedness. It says, I concluded surely in vain I have kept my motives pure and maintained a pure lifestyle. Right. So here it is, you do the right thing and you suffer for it. And you like, sometimes you get to the point of thinking like, damn, man, it seemed like the righteous get kicked in the ass, but the wicked, prosper. And the more wicked you are, the more you prosper. Yeah, in this world. Because that's the illusion. And that's what draws people. I don't want to be no goody two shoes, because the goody two shoes always, end up last. But what the scriptures say, the last shall be first and the first shall be last. It says, I suffer all day long and am punished every morning. Yeah, catching hell. And here it is. These devils, they living good. They living sumptuous. They jet setting. They having dinner in Gay Paris, and then they have breakfast in Singapore, so on and so forth. It says, if I had publicized these thoughts, I would have betrayed your loyal followers. Right. In other words, if we said when we speak about these things, Jake gets mad. So it's just like damn, it's like you can't win for losing. It says, when I tried to make sense of this, it was troubling to me, right? Because when we were all in the world, we saw certain things like, damn, man, it just, you just knew something was wrong, just we couldn't put our finger on it because we didn't have the truth, and it's just like, it seemed like the more wicked people were, the more they prospered. This devil was in power, scumbag that he is, but it's just like damn. So we didn't. This is why you have people out there that bug out, get on drugs, and become alcoholics, and or delete themselves because they become overwhelmed by these wicked individuals. It says, then I entered the precincts of the Most High's temple and understood the destiny of the wicked. And this is, when the Lord woke us up to this truth and we understood why it was the way it was. We're like, oh, I knew something was wrong. I just couldn't put my finger on it. There had to be more to this world. Something was up, but we just couldn't put our finger on it. But then when the Lord woke us up to the truth, we're like, oh, now because we know what their latter end is. It says, surely you put them in slippery places. You bring them down to ruin. Yeah, because the spot that they're in, the greed that they show, the way that they get their goods is sure to destroy them. But because they're prospering, they're doing good, they're not suffering, it emboldens them to keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it to the point where the Lord says, okay, that's enough. This is the cutoff point. So the Lord set them in slippery places. Yeah, you got the world, you got the control of everything, you living good, but that's going to be to your detriment. It says, how desolate they become in a mere moment. Right, because it's only going to take 1 hour to take this place out. This place and you have to remember that it took a long time for Esau to really get his empire off the ground. A lot of sweat, toil, a lot of, the leading of the Gadites and the different tribes, a lot of, watching their back and sleepless nights and, just a lot of, shit that they went through, underhandedly to build this empire up just to be taken down in an hour. If that ain't hell, I don't know what is. Terrifying judgments make their demise complete. Yeah, because they're going to be totally annihilated. It says, they are like a dream after one wakes up. Oh Lord, when you awake, you will despise them. Right. When the Lord raises up to the earth is going to know how the Most High feels about these Edomites. Everybody will, because Jake, we're the white men on the sign, man, fuck these devils. How about that? When the Lord wakes up, meaning when he starts to move on this place to destroy it, he's going to despise them. He's going to show the world how he really feels about these devils. It says, yes, my spirit was bitter and my insides felt sharp pain. I was ignorant and lacked insight. I was as senseless as an animal before you. But I am continually with you. You hold my right hand, right? You know? So now we understand. And that's what brought the comfort to us, to be able to, just, accept it because, we understand it's the plans of the Lord. See, before we didn't have no other choice. Now we have an anchor. Now we have a crutch to lean on. You guide me by your wise advice, and then you will lead me to a position of honor. And that's what we're waiting for, to be delivered, to be brought to that position of honor. Because we've been humiliated. What the scripture say, before honor comes humility. Whom do I have in heaven but you? I desire no one but you on earth. My flesh and my heart may grow weak, but the Most High always protects my heart and gives me stability. Yes, look, those far from you die. You destroy everyone who is unfaithful to you. But as for me, the Most High's presence is all I need. I have made the sovereign Lord Yahweh Bashem Shai my shelter, as I declare all the things you have done. That's right. And this is what we're supposed to do. You want to show your love and devotion to Yahweh Bashem Shai? Well, do the things that he told us to do. Go out here and teach. It says, as it says, as I declare all the things you have done. And that's our job. That's why we rehearsing the righteous acts. We out there prophesying, doing these lessons, until the Lord comes back. Now I'm gonna leave you with this scripture here. You can read the whole chapter. I got it in the NET. This is Psalms 58. Just go straight to the point. Psalms 58 and 10. The godly will rejoice when they see vengeance carried out. They will bathe their feet in the blood of the wicked, because the Lord's going to allow us to get vengeance on Esau. Remember, it says that I will bring vengeance upon Esau, or the Edomites, by the hand of my people Israel. It says, then observers will say, yes, indeed, the godly are rewarded. Yes, indeed, there is a power who judges in the earth, right? Even though sometimes it don't seem like we're going to get the upper hand, because it just seems like these devils are still in power. There's going to come a point where it's going to be known and we're going to get the upper hand. You're going to be like, damn, it's going to be like a nightmare. Because this is a fucking nightmare. No, but it's like going to be like a nightmare after you wake up. It's over. So with that, I pray that you brothers and few sisters have been edified. Till the next time I say, Shalom.